Καλησπέρα Μελβούρνη. Φίλες και φίλοι, είμαι ο Σωτήρης Σωτηρόπουλος και απόψε έχω τη χαρά και τη μεγάλη τιμή να σας παρουσιάσω τις εκδηλώσεις που έγιναν στο Ballarat την Κυριακή 11 Σεπτεμβρίου προς τιμήν του George Devine Treloar.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the beautiful city of Ballarat for the 3-year anniversary marking the unveiling of the George Devine Treloar Memorial Statue. My name is Penny Tombanopoulos and I'm the Public Relations Officer for Μέριμνα Ποντίων Κυριών Ωκεανίας and also a committee member of the George Treloar Memorial Committee. I would like to acknowledge the presence here with us today, the Deputy Mayor for the City of Ballarat, Ms Amy Johnson, former Mayor and Ballarat Councillor Samantha McIntosh, Victorian MP for the South Eastern Metropolitan Region, Government Whip in the Legislative Council, President of the Lemnos Gallipoli Commemorative Committee, and OAM, Mr Lee Talamas, President of the Federation of Pontian Associations, Mrs Simela Stamatopoulos, President of the Greek Community of Ballarat, Mr Angelis Christophori, Member of the Ballarat RSL, Mr Terry Green, President of the Greek Community of Moreland, Mr Savas Athanasiadis, Member of the Greek Community of Melbourne, Ms Vicky Kiritsis, President of the Pantrophilian Association of Melbourne, Ms Agatha Koroneas, President Peter Andrianopoulos and Secretary Katie Karabatsos from the Society of Kalamata, 23rd of March, President of the Central Pontian Association of Melbourne and Victoria, Pontiakiestia, Mr Conce Brailidis. Just doing a quick scan just to make sure, no? And, sorry. Mr Stephen Manatidis and Sakis Athanasiadis, two major contributors to this statue as well. Sending their apologies today are family members, the son George Treloar and his granddaughter Eleanor Lacey. To my knowledge, I think the floral arrangement that is already on the statue is from Eleanor Lacey herself. The Consul General of Greece in Melbourne, Mr Emmanuel Kakavelakis, the Honourable Catherine King, Minister of Infrastructure, Transport and Regional Development of Australia, the Honourable John Pandazopoulos, former Minister and Chair of Parks Victoria, Kat Theophanous, State Parliament Member of Northcote, and the President of the Greek Community of Melbourne, Mr Bill Papasteriadis. On September 8th, 2019, after a 4-year journey, we all gathered here on the magnificent Sturt Street precinct and unveiled this stunning statue that stands in front of us all. Unfortunately, for 2 years, we were unable to make the trip back here to hold such proceedings like we will be today. On behalf of the George Treloar Memorial Committee, I would like to thank Daniel Maloney, Mayor of Ballarat, Samantha McIntosh, former Mayor, and Angelis Christophori, President of the Greek Community of Ballarat, for laying wreaths on our behalf for those 2 years. Thankfully today, 3 years later, we are all able to come together again this morning to honour, celebrate and commemorate George Devine Treloar, his humanitarian efforts and advocacy for the Pontic Greek refugees of Asia Minor at the end of World War I. Now I'd like to introduce the Deputy Mayor of Ballarat, Ms Amy Johnson, and invite her to say a few words.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Amy Johnson and I'm a councillor for the City of Ballarat and the Deputy Mayor. It's my pleasure to be here with you today on behalf of our Mayor, Daniel Maloney, to help celebrate one of our most distinguished citizens and pay respect to his humanitarian efforts and lasting legacy, Mr George Treloar. Before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we live and work on, the Wadawurrung and the Jar Jar Wurrung people, and recognise their continuing connection to the land and waterways. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and extend this to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We have many distinguished guests with us here this morning, and I won't go through them all again, but I would like to say welcome and thank you for being here. George Devine Treloar was born on the 23rd of April 1884 in Ballarat. He was schooled locally here at St Patrick's, and he was the son of the first pharmacy in Ballarat. The name Treloar is recognised at the site of the original family business, now the UFS Pharmacy in Ballarat Bridge Mall. The Australian Greek community, and specifically the Pontic community, acknowledged George Devine Treloar as a heroic figure in the story of migration to Australia. He is considered an inspiration for future generations to show humanity, bravery, and compassion. If you can believe it, it's been 3 years since we first gathered here to celebrate the unveiling of this statue. And we stand here again today to continue to pay our respects to a man who assisted over 108,000 migrants who were refugees from Asia Minor to resettle in Greece at the end of the First World War. For Ballarat, it's a reminder that such a great humanitarian existed within our community and that his legacy lives on, not only in those ancestors of the Pontic Greek people he helped stay alive, but also right here in our town as an example to all that learn about him and what he achieved. For his work in resettling refugees, George Treloar was appointed to the Order of the Redeemer, the oldest and highest decoration awarded by the modern Greek state. The George Treloar Memorial was an initiative of the Μέριμνα Ποντίων Association of Melbourne, Victorian, Pontiaki Estia, and the City of Ballarat. It is also a credit to the George Treloar Memorial Committee that worked tirelessly to establish this sculpture. As we can see behind me, the wonderful work of artist Liz Johnston captured George Treloar's compassion, his humanity, and his love of others so well in its artistic expression. The statue is also, importantly, the first in the Sturt Street Gardens precinct by a female artist. Not only does this fine statue communicate an inspirational story to all, but importantly, it provides a place for the family of George Treloar that is still alive around Australia, as well as any of the descendants of those he helped, a place to commemorate and remember his contribution to humanity. Ballarat is very lucky to be able to claim George Treloar as one of our own and have this statue as a permanent inspiration in a world that needs such humanitarian examples now more than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next to say a few words, I'd like to invite Samantha McIntosh, Councillor of Ballarat and the Mayor of the time of the unveiling, Mrs. Litsa Athanasiadis, President of Μέριμνα Ποντίων Κυριών Ωκεανίας, and Jim Clavin, Historian and member of the George Treloar Memorial Committee.
Για τις πιο δύσκολες ώρες σας, είμαστε κοντά σας. Παναγιώτης Τζιότσης, Orthodox Funeral Services. Με κατανόηση, συνέπεια και επαγγελματισμό, όπως απαιτούν οι περιστάσεις. Παναγιώτης Τζιότσης, Orthodox Funeral Services. Τηλέφωνο 03 95 68 58 58.
Good morning, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here after many years of significant work from your community, a community that absolutely believed in the work, the very special work of the great George Devine Treloar. I would like to also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and future, given that we are here today to talk about a significant part of our history. That Indigenous history goes back 40, 50, 60,000 years, and it's a history that we reflect upon each day. We now, as we drive down Sturt Street, reflect upon the work of George Devine Treloar as well. This statue standing before us reminds many people to stop and think of the importance and the significance of why we're remembering such a beautiful man. I was over the moon as Mayor of the City of Ballarat to be able to work with Litsa and your whole team to ensure that this statue was unveiled. I was excited to hear from the St Patrick's community, St Pat's College, just up the street a bit further, of a posthumous award that was about to be presented, remembering George Devine Treloar, not long before we were about to unveil the statue. They were not aware of the work of your community. They were not aware of the work of our council, but they were absolutely aware of the work of George Devine Treloar, his family, and the other significant memories of his family in Ballarat. We just heard from our Deputy Mayor that the cafe in the Bridge Mall is still there to remind us all of this work, Treloar's Cafe. There's many people that have been very proud, not just your community and those that know so much about this history, but our arts community as well, knowing that Liz Johnson pulled together the most amazing story in this beautiful statue. She really did reflect the significant history of Lamona, and I think Litza will share us a little more about Lamona's story soon. Liz was able to put in our street for all of us a significant part of our history, social and cultural history, and a very important message for our young children and our grandchildren into the future. They will go on with much greater memories, with much greater awareness and understanding of how important it is for all of us to look after those around us and to remember the people that George saved, the thousands of children, the thousands of families that lived much happier lives because of the work that he did. I would absolutely like to remember as well people like John Serpentidis and his wife, and there will be a lovely little orchid that came from his wife. It opens in flower just before this anniversary every year. It's in my garden and I treasure the beautiful flowers on it and look forward to putting that into Lamona's little mug. Thank you everyone for coming along, and please do continue to bring others here, sharing this wonderful story and celebrating everything that we need to that George has done before us. Thank you.
I would like to welcome you all here today, and thank you very much for coming, and in particular thank you to these lovely young people in their costumes who took time to come to Ballarat, which is an hour and a half away from town. I would like to take you on a journey somewhere that I've never been, and somewhere that many of us that haven't been. I would like to talk about Lamona. Lamona translates to mother of son, and I got that from Kostas Pataridis, who's standing in the crowd. Lamona was actually born in Trapezon of the Pontos. She was my grandmother's sister. My grandmother, Irini, was born in Trapezon, and after the Asia Minor catastrophe, she and some relatives, because she had lost her parents, were taken to Russia. She married Nicholas in Russia. She had 5 children. When he was taken away to Siberia, never to be seen again, she went back to Greece with her children. One day in the village of Agios Dimitrios, where she resided, a blind man from a nearby village came and saw her. He said to her, "You have a sister, Irini, and she lives about 45 kilometers away from here." She said, "My sister was thrown overboard. I don't have a sister." However, he insisted that she had a sister and that she was living in a town nearby. Yaya Irini asked him, "Do you know her name?" And he said, "Yes, I do. Her name is Lamona." Yaya then said, "I never had a sister with the name Lamona. My sister's name was, in fact, Anastasia." Now, this story is a little bit like the story of Thea Hallow, not even my name. Then she decided, Yaya Irini gave her a note and said to him that when you go to that village, pass on this note and we'll see what happens. Months later, whilst my mum was sitting outside the house, and excuse me, I'm going to go Greek first and then I will say it in English. Η μάνα μου, εκεί που καθόταν έξω από την αυλή, έριξε τη θωρέα να συστράταν και λέει, είδα μια γυναίκα ψηλά σαν τη μάνα μου, με τρανά τσάμιας και μπουκάλια ποδάρια, και όπως ερχότανε σήμα, έφτασε η μάνα μου και λέει, πουλόπο μου, την Ειρήνη να γνωρείς? Λέει η μάνα μου. Η μάνα με να πέσει στην κουζίνα. Και μετά καταλαβαίνετε τι έγινε. So when the blind man went to that village, came back, I'll stop for a moment. For a moment in the distance, my mother was sitting outside the house many years later, and she saw a lady from the distance coming towards her. She thought, oh my goodness, she looks like my mum. She has long plaited hair and beautiful legs like my mother. As she approached, getting closer and closer to my mum, she said to her, dear, do you know Irini? And my mother said, yes, I do. She's in the kitchen. That was her sister. She hadn't seen her for 18 years. She changed her name because, this is Lemona though, she had changed her name because her husband wanted her to be called Lemona like his first wife, who he adored apparently. Her name was Anastasia, not Lemona, but Lemona stands here because she represents that person. I thank you very, very much for being here today and taking the time to come all the way from Melbourne. As I can see a lot of you out in the crowd here. A warm thank you very, very much and take care. Thank you.
Για τις πιο δύσκολες ώρες σας, είμαστε κοντά σας. Παναγιώτης Τζιότσης, Orthodox Funeral Services. Με κατανόηση, συνέπεια και επαγγελματισμό, όπως απαιτούν οι περιστάσεις. Παναγιώτης Τζιότσης, Orthodox Funeral Services. Τηλέφωνο 03 95 68 58 58.
Greek News 24. Πώς θα μάθω τα νέα στην Μελβούρνη? Greek News 24. Πώς θα μάθω τι γίνεται στην παροικία μας? Greek News 24. Μάθε τα νέα στην Ελλάδα, στην Αυστραλία και σε όλο τον κόσμο. Greek News 24. Έγκαιρα και έγκυρα.
Thank you. Those great words. On behalf of the George Devine Treloar Memorial Committee, I want to say a few words. And in opening, I'd just like also to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wadawurrung and Jaja Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. It's 10 years since I started looking into researching the story of George Treloar, and was able to visit some of the villages in northern Greece which he'd helped re-establish, along with Lee Talamas, who's with us here today. I just wanted to share the story of George, his background, and Lisa will talk a bit more about Lemonia. As we've heard, he was born in 1884, grew up in Ballarat, the son of Jane and Thomas Treloar, attending St Patrick's College. By all accounts, he was a young man of energy, trying his hand at many tasks, from volunteering in the Victorian Rifles to embarking on a career as a professional actor that would take him to the centre of the British Empire and performance on the London stage. With the coming of the First World War, George answered the call as so many from Ballarat did. His military career began with his joining the British Army, and soon he was transferred to the elite Coldstream Guards. Serving in the Western Front, his bravery saw him survive many engagements, saw him rise to the rank of Major and be awarded the Distinguished Service Order and Military Cross. The end of the First World War saw George volunteer for service during the chaos that convulsed the former Russian Empire. The end of the Russian Civil War brought George to Constantinople, the former capital of the great Byzantine Empire and the soon-to-collapse Ottoman Empire. Here George found his bride as well as his calling, providing help to the refugees of conflict. George's great work in Constantinople assisting the Russian refugees would see him appointed as the League of Nations Commissioner for Refugees in Greece in 1922. It was here that he worked tirelessly with his wife, family and a small group of assistants to provide aid and comfort to what would eventually total over 100,000 Christian refugees from the violent collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Based in the town of Komitini, and then Thessaloniki, George and his small administration created new villages to accommodate these desperate people, ensuring that they had enough food to sustain life and the training for their new lives. Working with insufficient funds, George used his own resources to keep the assistance going, helping refugees well beyond the number originally envisaged. For his efforts, George would earn the praises of those he had assisted. One of the new towns he had helped create was named in his honour, Treloar, where his service is honoured to this day. He was awarded the Greek Gold Cross of the Order of the Redeemer in 1923, returned to Australia in 1927, where he died in 1980. Here in the town of his birth now stands this memorial, dedicated to his memory and good works, created by the people of Ballarat and the descendants of those he saved, the refugees from Asia Minor. To George Treloar, Ballarat's son, decorated soldier and refugee helper, in the words of the great Greek historian Thucydides, his glory lies not in the earth, but in the hearts of men. Thank you.
Φίλες και φίλοι, εδώ φτάσαμε στο τέλος της απόψινής μας εκπομπής. Μην ξεχνάτε να βοηθάτε αυτούς που μας υποστηρίζουν. Τον Παναγιώτη Τζιότζη από το Orthodox Funeral Services, το Meet Me Σουβλακερί, το Τριφυλία Olive Oil και το Ελλάς TV. Μέχρι την επόμενη εβδομάδα από το Σωτήρη Σωτηρόπουλο, γεια σας και χαρά σας.